You know, it was mostly high school, college, a little summer stock. That's actually where I knew Buddy from. We went to Port Richmond High School together. So, you know, I did all the shows in school, and I remember when Buddy was getting ready to do Combat Shock, I was sitting in a comic book store. And Buddy walked into the store, he says, "What are you doing these days?" And I said, as I recall, I said I was reading comic books. And he asked me if I'd be interested in doing a part in this film that he's working on. And if I remember right, it was you know, it was all typewritten and well read by the time I got to look at it. He showed me a little footage of what he had worked on, and so whenever he called me, I came.
This ain't no charity. Now you listen, you get that money. I don't care how, but you better get it.
When we first talked about the character, you know, this was a guy who was a drug dealer. He was a pimp. He was about as bad as you could get, and he was a bully. So that was, you know, really the focus that Buddy and I discussed, was that this is just somebody with zero empathy at all, although I don't think we used that word. Real piece of garbage, and he was a brutal individual.
You see, Frankie, we're gonna get the money one way or another. Either you pay, or your family does.
You know, when we're roughing people up in the film, were funny because at the time I was 145 pounds, you wouldn't believe it today. I was a little guy. But these guys in real life, if I had to move them around, I would have pushed, they would have just not moved.
All right, that's enough. Don't kill him yet.
Most of the photography that I was involved in was in the summertime. And so we were just trying our best to look, you know, because we were dressed like it was October. So we were trying our best not to, you know, to sweat. But we shot down on the terrace, which at the time, you know, I mean, parts of Richmond Terrace is still a little depressed. But at the time, it really was, New York was in a bad way. It was, you know, it looked rougher, I think, than it was. I don't recall running into any bad characters or being afraid. I just went where Buddy told me to go, and we shot. I think that, you know, there were parts of Staten Island that were beautiful, always. But Buddy was looking for a very specific type of look. But in looking at the film, I think he wanted very much for the areas on Staten Island he used to have at least some sense that they were a battlefield themselves. You know, this was a place that had seen a lot of violence, and I think he was looking for that particular look, and he certainly got it. Buddy always would tell us ahead of time, as I recall, what pages we were going to shoot. So we always knew what scene we were going to be preparing for. The reason that I remember so vividly that he didn't shoot a lot of footage, you know, like he wasn't shooting 4 or 6 to 1, is that we usually got things in 1 or 2 takes. And we would have, you know, a good 20-minute talk with whoever was going to be in the scene before we actually shot it. And then we would rehearse it a few times. We'd play around a little bit with the blocking. He'd look at, you know, how he wanted to shoot it. And then we generally got it in a take or 2. You know, Buddy always came across to me, and we worked on a couple of things together. We did Combat Shock. We did a couple of short subjects together. But he was always relaxed. You know, he always made me feel welcome. A very open guy. He would explain what he wanted, but he was always open to input the other way. And I think he liked very much, as I recall, being part of the process. You know, I think he enjoyed that back and forth that went on between his actors and himself. He always had suggestions, but he let the actor find what they wanted to find. You know, you found your own voice, your physical approach. That was really all up to the actor. And Buddy would tell you whether or not he believed it or not. That's an actor's director. We were working on a single camera shoot, as I recall it, and poor Stella, we ran her ragged, because if we had to run through a scene, she was running behind us. If we had to jump off of something, she was jumping behind us. She was our cinematographer. As I recall, she was a very nice young lady, very pretty girl. And she really was another person who was extremely prepared. We had a running joke that at the time I was in my 20s, And I was just starting to lose the hair on the back of my head. So she managed to always catch at least one shot of the back of my head so that when I got to look at Rushes, I could see a bald spot. Well, the one that sticks out is the day that Paco gets shot, and it's a pretty bloody scene. It was in the heat of the summer. So I have this leather jacket on, and they're cutting and they're putting the squibs on. And it's all Cairo syrup at the time. We shot it, and I had a packet in my mouth so that the blood could come out of the mouth. And we go through the whole sequence, and I'm covered in this Cairo syrup. And I think every fruit fly and every mosquito on Staten Island found me. But I remember thinking about the film, about 6, 8 months ago. I went, my wife's an assistant principal, and we took our kids to Washington, D.C. And we went to the Vietnam War Memorial, and I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's this wall, and it runs along this pool, and it's got the name of everybody who was killed in Vietnam. I got the same feeling from that memorial that I get from the film. It was unrelenting. And that's what that memorial is meant to be, and I think that's what Combat Shock is. It's an unrelenting, it's an honest look at what we considered to be, I think in history has said, it was an immoral war. And it cost us, 55,000 people. It spoke for a generation, and whatever you think of the world situation now, I think there are a lot of similarities between what's going on in the world now and what was going on at that time. So I think that people are rediscovering that sensibility of things being out of control, as Vietnam certainly was. At that time, we all had a lot of strong feelings about Vietnam. I came away thinking that, we had accomplished something. If nobody else had ever seen the film, we made a real strong statement about Vietnam and about, the price that you pay. The war extracts a price after the war. And I think that that's one of the reasons that film still resonates today, is because we were unrelenting in that message. There are, except for the scenes that Troma tacked on of the helicopters, there are no battle scenes in Combat Shock. The battles all fought at home.
Head to talkintroma.com for more trauma history. Also available wherever you listen.